Let's remind ourselves how collisions work. We go back to the days when we used bus topologies on Ethernet networks, maybe 10 base 2, maybe 10 base 5 technologies, and the devices attached to this shared segment had to make sure that there was not currently a frame on that shared segment before they transmitted. We're not allowed to have more than one frame on a shared segment at any one time. And remember that they could use a technique called CSMACD. Carrier sense multiple access with collision detection. Carrier sense meaning that they can determine that they are attached to the network and they can listen to the network to see if a frame is present on the shared segment. Multiple access means that we don't have to take turns. We can have multiple devices accessing the same segment, and when it's clear to transmit for anybody, they can transmit. And collision detection, the CD in CSMACD, means that if a collision does occur, if we do have two stations that transmit at the same time and those transmissions collide, we can detect that and we can retransmit. Here's a challenge that can occur on a shared segment. Let's say that we had a couple of stations, maybe the two bottom stations on screen, they were simultaneously listening to the wire to see if it was okay to transmit, and they heard the same period of silence. They independently concluded that it was okay to transmit, so they both transmit at the same time. And what happens? They collide. We had a collision that occurs. Something that's often misunderstood about collisions, by the way. You might guess that as soon as a collision is detected, the remainder of the frame would not be transmitted. The PC would say, "Oh no, my frame collided with another frame. Let me stop." Actually, that device will continue sending that frame. The idea is we want to make sure that everybody on the shared segment knows that a collision occurred. And if we stop transmitting immediately as soon as we detect a collision, other devices might not know. So we continue to transmit that frame. That process, by the way, is known as jamming. Jamming is continuing to transmit a frame for a short time so that other devices on a shared segment can know that a collision did occur. And after the collision occurs, the devices that sent the colliding frames, they obviously need to retransmit those frames, but they don't want a collision to happen again. So what they will do, they will independently set a random back-off timer. Just as an example, let's pretend that the device on the bottom left set a random back-off timer of 10 milliseconds, and the device on the bottom right set a random back-off timer of 20 milliseconds. And then, when they retransmit after these random amounts of time, they're less likely to collide again. That's the way that CSMACD can help support multiple devices on the same shared segment. Today, though, we almost never use a physical bus topology like we have here. In fact, we've also largely gotten away from Ethernet hubs. But if you do run into an Ethernet hub, it's important to understand that all of the ports on an Ethernet hub, they're in the same collision domain. Meaning that even though we're physically connected in a star topology, logically it's still a bus. It's still an Ethernet bus where there can only be one frame on this shared segment at any one time. We've got one collision domain. Remember how a hub operates. A hub does not make intelligent forwarding decisions. It just takes bits that it receives in on one port and sends them out other ports. This can limit scalability. If we have lots of devices on the same shared segment, they're going to be able to transmit less frequently. To increase our scalability, we could replace that hub, as most people have, with an Ethernet switch. In the example on screen, I have 4 devices connected to this Ethernet switch, and as a result, I've got 4 collision domains. Each port on an Ethernet switch represents its own collision domain. And because we only have the one device on a switch port, that means that we don't even need to run CSMACD. This is a big deal. If I don't have to run CSMACD because there is no possibility of collision, that means that these stations connected to an Ethernet switch, they can run in full duplex mode as opposed to half duplex mode. In full duplex mode, that means that I can have a station that is simultaneously transmitting and receiving. If we had a hub, and if we had to run CSMACD, a requirement is we have to run in half duplex mode. This means that an Ethernet switch not only helps us scale our networks by helping us out with the collision issue, but it gives us a more effective use of our bandwidth. We can now use full duplex as opposed to half duplex communication.